Hi everybody and welcome to the Royal Chess YouTube channel. My name is Kanovsky and this is part 9, almost the last one, of my Dave chess lectures for you. For today I have chosen one of my another really horrible losses in my chess career, and it is the game which I have played in Czech Extra League in 2013. And I had the black pieces against strong Czech master Jan Jiptner. In this game I have decided to play a very interesting line, but maybe a bit risky line. And after d4, g6, c4, bishop g7, knight c3, I decided to go for c5 here. And White has, of course, many options in this position. You can play e3, knight f3, and so on. But the principal one is, of course, to play d5. Because by this move, White is creating a very strong pawn on d5, which is, for example, covering natural developing c6 square for Black's knight on b8. But on the other hand, after d5, Black can play the variation I was talking about, and it is bishop takes c3, check, and after taking on c3 by b pawn, Black is playing f5 with the idea to stop White from playing e2, e4. And after only 5 moves, we already have, in my opinion, very interesting situation on the board. So let's talk for a while about it. Okay, so what happened here? As we can see, of course, Black lost his pair of bishops. He lost his important dark colored bishop. But on the other hand, White's pawn structure is a bit crippled at the moment. And especially these two pawns on c3 and c4 can be really weak in the future. So of course Black's plan here is to attack these white pawns, for example with queen a5, also with d6 and maneuvering knight through d7 to b6 square and attacking pawn on c4. Another option is b6 with bishop a6, and also, for example, Black can play after queen a5 also queen a6 and again attack c4 pawn. So this is quite a clear plan for Black, and of course White, because as I have said, he's having a pair of bishops at the moment. Needs to open the position as soon as possible for his bishops and of course other pieces. So he needs to be active as much as possible and as soon as possible. So for example, very interesting continuation here is h4 with the clear idea to play h5 and open the king side, open the rook, and just attack the king side, which is of course weakened without dark colored bishop. But my opponent decided to go for another option here, and he played e4, which seems a bit odd, because as I have said, Black plays f5 to stop White from playing e2, e4, and suddenly White is playing e4. But okay, as I have said, this is very interesting line, and with this move White is of course sacrificing a pawn, at least for a while. And after taking on e4, the idea behind e4 is to play f3, so to play a gambit. And here I knew, or I remembered, that taking on f3 is quite bad, because after taking on f3, white is simply taken by knight, and this is already a position which is quite unpleasant for black, because white has much more than a compensation for sacrificed pawn, because now he has very, very nice control of the whole center of the board. He's got very easy developing moves here. So this is really not a position which is black looking for in this line. So after f3 there is another good move, and it is e5, which is very nice, I think, because after e5 it is almost impossible to take on e4. It is because of the very unpleasant check on h4, and now after g3 black simply takes on e4 with forks on the king and the rook on h1, and the only option for white is to play queen e2 here. So to be able, after taking on h1, take on e5 with also attacking both black's king and rook. But here, of course, black can simply exchange queens and to play, let's say, d6. And in this situation, black is much better because he's a clear pawn up, and also white's pair of bishops is not strong enough here, because the position is not open enough for them. So after e5, this is not a good continuation for white, and also taking on e6 is not good here, because with this move white is losing his very strong pawn on d5, and also black doesn't need to take on e6 here, which is quite important. He can easily play knight c6, and for example, if white would take on d7, which is also probably quite bad, then after taking on d7 by bishop, black is suddenly in advance with developing. He can play, for example, queen a5, long castles, knight f6, rook e8, and suddenly is really very good, probably already better here. So on the other hand, this is really not what is white looking for in this variation. So after e5, my opponent played a very good move, and it is queen c2. And after queen c2, this is already probably a critical moment of this game, which is quite interesting. And then it is so early, but here, and it is of course probably the main reason why I have chosen this game and I am showing to you, I made a horrible mistake. Not only chess mistake, but also, let's say, a bit psychological mistake, because I knew that after f3, taking on f3 is bad. And I remembered e5 is the right move, and that after e5, black should be fine. So after queen c2, I was thinking like, okay, so if after e5 black should be fine, then it should mean that after this move, after queen c2, it is already possible to take on f3. So I have taken on f3, which is of course still really bad for black here, because it helps white just too much, especially with developing of white pieces, and as we could have, we can see in this game, white's play is really simple after that. So it is really a very big mistake. Instead, taking on f3, black should of course play very simple d6 move, and let's say white would take on e4, here black can play, for example, check on h4, and after g3, this is quite an interesting position, but I think this is a good position for black, because here with this closed center, white's pair of bishops is really not so strong. And for example, after h6, bishop g2, black can easily play king f8 with king g7, then to play knight d7, knight f6, and so on. And in this position, in fact, black knights could be better than white bishops, especially because of that very closed character of this position. So I think this is a good situation for black. But it is, of course, if black doesn't take on f3, which I did, and after knight takes f3, now I really don't understand what let's say I was missing, because it is so clear that after d6, bishop d3, knight e7, this is already a bit problem for black, that after knight f6, white could maybe sacrifice bishop on g6, maybe now, maybe later. So knight e7 is covering this option. But after castles, white has brutal compensation for a sacrificed pawn. He's much in advance with developing. His pieces are really nicely placed. Both bishops are very active, and it is, of course, a very big difference if white has or has not a pawn on e4, because if white would have a pawn on e4, it would be a big difference, and in fact that pawn would be so good for black here. Without that pawn, white has very nice activity of his pieces, and defending black's position is really hard here. I made castles here. For example, after bishop f5, white can easily exchange, and after exchanging these bishops, there is a problem that after knight g5, there is a very weak e6 square, and of course white knight is going to jump there with a very strong position. So this is really not good for black. But after castles, white simply played bishop h6, and here I have to say that in the analysis of this game, I already wasn't able to find a good continuation for black, a good defense. Because, for example, after rook f7, there is a simple knight to g5 move, and after exchanging rooks, this is really very nice position to evaluate all the line with taking on f3, because now, as you can see, 5 white pieces are very active, and now look at black pieces. It is such a big difference. Then it is, of course, really easy to understand that white is just winning here. For example, after knight f5, he can very easily take on f5 with everything he can, and after queen takes f5, black king is just going to be checkmated. These two pieces are just too far from the king, and the game is just over here. So I tried to play rook f5 here, and of course if white would take on f5, then I believe black's position would be quite good. but White has no need to give up his active bishop and active pair of bishops. He can play much better move here, and it is g4. And after g4, I think black is totally lost at the moment. There is really nothing to do with the position. White pieces are just too active here, and after rook f6, knight g5, rook f4. As you can see, black's rook is just making too much moves here, but there was nothing better here. And after simply taking on f4, White already has several very good options. For example, queen e2 was very strong here, with simple idea to play knight e6 and then to take with a queen. But rook f1 is strong enough. White simply activates his last non-active piece. And again, all white pieces are very active, and on the other hand, black's army is just sleeping in this position, and we can finish the game, I think, but it is really clear that black just cannot survive this. Okay. It is nice to check white's king once at least, but of course it really doesn't save the game for black. And after another check and king h3, I had to resign, of course, because the threat of rook f8 with checkmate after knight taking and queen taking on f8 is not possible to defend here. Again, you can see that these two pieces, so black's white card bishop and queenside rook, did absolutely nothing during the game. So it is really a nice example, I think, that it is often possible to make just one mistake, and after that mistake you just can do nothing with the game. I mean, in this particular game I made a horrible mistake with taking on f3, and after that white simply activated all his pieces, started to attack my weakened king, and the game was just over there. So it is a nice example of this line, and as I have said, a bit risky line. So in these lines, it is really easy to make just one mistake and lose the game, like I did in this game. So it was everything from part 9. Thank you for watching. I hope it was at least a bit useful for you, and I am looking forward to you at part 10, which would be the last part of this serial, and of course after that another serial about very different topic would be to come. Goodbye.